Hello, this is another one of my videos on a long essay I wrote a while back on sociological theories regarding the emergence and development of new religious movements, this one dealing with crises of social potency. So we've already talked about psychological theories, deprivation theories, and we're now talking about crisis theories, which I've subdivided into a number of sections. Crises of social potency. The term, I should say, is my own, so hopefully it's a useful addition. Crises of social potency are those in which individuals or collectivities experience some threat to their control over the economic, political, cultural, and organismic resources which provide a basis for their self-esteem, and in extreme cases, also their physical survival. For such crises to generate new religious or other social movements, they must presumably involve the process sketched by Urry, in which the disruption of taken for granted assumptions about the world cause people to make structural rather than conventional comparisons. Dissatisfaction with the existing social order rather than the universe in general being more likely when existing power inequalities were delegitimated, as by the development of counter-definitions of reality. When there were no perceived opportunities for social or geographical mobility, and when the relationship between the powerful and the powerless was both interdependent and impersonal. Socially, crises of social potency may be seen in terms of Durkheim's discussion of anomie as a period in which sudden and unanticipated changes in the social order upset the relatively precise and stable framework of expectations and aspirations which people normally hold. According to Goer, there were basically three different contexts in which such changes occurred: when value expectations remained constant, whilst the capabilities for attaining those expectations declined, and when these expectations rose, whilst the attainment capabilities remained constant or declined. This last situation has been described in James Davis's J-curve model. You're probably going to have to look that up on Wikipedia if you don't know what it is. Other contexts which have been suggested include the aftermath of war and the gaining of new ways of looking at the world, as by education. The status inconsistency consequent upon the mismatch of individuals' economic, political, and cultural statuses, and the Durkheimian contexts of sudden economic disaster or prosperity, and the resultant declassification. The supposed political and religious responses to crises of social potency are seen most clearly in those contexts in which the capability to obtain value expectations declined, situations rarely readily productive of what Tilley has termed reactive action, that is, action stemming from a group's resistance to attempts to expropriate its resources by other political and economic agents. Motivated by a strong sense of offended natural justice, such action may take a variety of political forms, depending on the nature of the attempted expropriations. Thus, in traditional agrarian societies, such action could include flights from encirclement, tax rebellions, and peasant invasions of enclosed land. Again, as economic disruptions in such societies commonly led to a reduction in the available surplus product and the resultant increase in exploitation, as dominant social groups sought to maintain their position at the expense of the poor, political discontent was commonly linked with such variables as food shortages and price rises, balance of payments difficulties, or just general economic crises. As to the religious responses to such crises, Pereira was in no doubt that the specific context in which millenarianism emerged was that of the rapid imposition of relationships of domination and subordination in pre-modern societies, whether as a result of rapid economic change or of colonialism. Other writers have noted the context as one productive of millenarianism without giving it the central importance attached by Pereira. The severe and multiple subordination represented by colonialism has been particularly productive of millenarianism, both in such pre-modern instances as Roman Judea and early Islamic Khorasan, and more especially during the European colonial expansion, in which, from the Columbian Indian movement of 1546 onwards, the occurrence of millenarian movements in these areas closely paralleled the actual extension of European control over the rest of the world. Whilst there are exceptions to the overall pattern, the mass of historical and anthropological evidence relative to colonial millenarianism suggests that where millenarianism assumes a political or revolutionary aspect, it does so as a direct response to the colonial impact, or as part of a more general expression of anti-colonial discontent. That such political millenarianism occurs in societies or social confederations in which there is either a tradition of theocratic or prophetic leaders assuming a political role, or a lack of adequately coordinated formal political apparatus with which to resist the colonial power. That where the millenarianism is not overtly political, the millenarians are seemingly well aware of their powerlessness vis-à-vis the colonialists, and that all forms of colonial millenarianism, and perhaps particularly in the non-violent or merely symbolically aggressive ones, the millenarians feel threatened, not just by the political coercion of the colonialists, but by the threat of loss of traditional cultural identity and self-esteem. Those instances of millenarianism which occur outside of the colonial context are generally far more varied in their occurrence. In pre-modern societies, at least, the most common context appears to be socio-religious subordination. Thus, for example, in both diaspora Judaism and in many Christian millenarian movements, millenarianism appears to have occurred in direct response to actual or threatened socio-religious persecution. Alternatively, some outbreaks of Christian millenarianism have simply occurred during the times of religio-political turmoil and revolt, as for example during the Hussite Revolt, the Reformation, and the German Peasants' War, the English Civil War, and the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic periods. According to Wurthnau, such instances tend to occur amongst social groups experiencing socioeconomic subordination, and whilst this often seems to have been the case, the possibility that some more general crisis of meaning may also have been involved seems strong. Certainly, the experience of socioeconomic subordination by itself appears not to have been sufficient cause for the emergence of millenarianism in such societies. The more normal response to such experience was non-millenarian revolt. The sense of profound societal upheaval may well be an important additional factor here, as with the general sense of the passing of the established order which accompanied some major historical turmoils, as for example accompanied the more specific conditions of socioeconomic disruption and subordination which formed the background for Taiping millenarianism in 19th century China. Islamic millenarianism is more difficult to interpret in these terms, for in periods prior to the colonial impact, its messianism in the form of Mahdiism, has also served as a vehicle for the political ambitions of various tribally based religio-political adventurers. In more general terms, however, Islamic millenarianism has certainly served to express politico-economic and more especially religious discontent, often seeming to be linked to conceptions of a return to the idealized religious tradition. Only in modern, mostly Christian instances of millenarianism does this prevailing pattern cease to be readily identifiable in terms of socio-religious subordination and discontent. In large measure, this lack of an obvious crisis referent may be linked to the more complex and depoliticized role which modern millenarian sects have generally come to perform. Although clearly political in its impact in pre-modern societies, millenarianism cannot be regarded simply as a form of primitive rebellion or as being in some way pre-political or perhaps even post-political. Millenarianism may well serve a political function when no formal means of political mobilization are available, but even in the absence of such means, the oppressed seem quite capable of fomenting riots and rebellions without significant millenarianism being involved. Over and again, the crucial additional factor of millenarian engendering crises appears to be the threat to established patterns of culture, particularly of religion. That's what I'm going to say for the moment. I probably need to make another video at some point on millenarianism because there are so many complex issues involved, but that will be another day or another month perhaps. Anyway, that's what I'm going to say for the moment. Thank you very much for listening. Particular thanks to my patrons for their kind support and encouragement. Without them, I wouldn't be able to make these videos. If you want to support my channel, you're very welcome to do so. It really is helpful. Like, comment and share on the video. Subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos. I'll give Patreon a link below if you want to provide practical support. Next week we'll talk about crises of meaning and psychic fulfillment. As usual, my apologies for not providing you with the references that I've given in the video. As I've said, my papers are all in storage at the moment, so that includes the bibliography to this essay. And also apologies if there's a lot of background traffic noise. It's basically impossible in this city to be ever clear of that. Have a good day.